It's such a very simple little refrain, isn't it? But I thought it was maybe just what we would like to say or to sing together this morning, taking us through the understanding that God so loved us, he gave Jesus. And it's not the end of the story, is it? Because we're reminded he's coming back again. If we went to Sunday school when we were about that high, primary, if you can remember it, we will definitely have learnt about Zacchaeus. The minute you hear the name, you identify, I know. I don't think I should elaborate at all this morning. Sufficient to say that many years ago, somebody must have preached when I was there, trying to listen, about Zacchaeus and used two words, and I stored them in my memory: short and shady. Now, I'm short, so think what you will. But it's rather good, isn't it? Short and shady. We know, of course, that he was the superintendent of taxes in Jerusalem. Not many of us, I guess, are particularly fond of the taxman, but we pay our dues and hopefully we treat them with respect if we ever meet them. But Luke, of course, hints, and only hints, that like most of the employees of the Romans, he was a crook. He chose to work for the Romans, of course. He was greedy, fraudulent, and ruthless. And so we think of him as the very little man, very rich, and very lonely. I looked and listened again as we heard those familiar verses from Luke chapter 19. And verse 3 sort of jumped out at me. He wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to see Jesus. I guess you've often thought about that, and I have too. How was it that that little man, very rich, very lonely, very probably, in fact we know he was a crook, wanted to see Jesus? I think, and it's only me, but you'll have your own thoughts, I think he'd heard about Jesus. There was no texting or emails or Facebook, but the old grapevine always works, doesn't it? And I think Zacchaeus had heard quite a bit about Jesus. And I think he just knew that here was a man who perhaps would love him, be his friend. Because Jesus, of course, was already recorded in the scriptures, being called the friend of publicans and sinners. So the thought was there, something was stirring within. The picture of Zacchaeus climbing the tree is very, very familiar, so we won't go into that. But we can imagine, because we're all grown-up people, that to climb a tree in front of other people would be probably, well, it might not be for some of you, but I would probably find it a bit difficult, actually, to actually do it in front of people. There were, of course, so many difficulties to overcome. I guess high on the list, his pride, his own self-worth. Certainly his standing in the community. And then all the time, of course, the crowd wasn't like you this morning respectfully listening, they would have been shouting and complaining. What's Jesus doing for this man? Why does he want to see him? Look at him climbing the tree. So nobody was there going to give him a little bit of a help, a little bit of a hand. But Zacchaeus was absolutely certain he wanted to see Jesus. It's the key verse in the story in Luke 19. Well, the crowd was absolutely outraged. And we know what happens when a crowd really gets outraged. The rage gets louder and louder. But let's focus on Jesus. For Jesus, of course, this was literally a few days before Calvary. How was it that with the cross looming just ahead, how was it that Jesus took time and stopped on the road to Jerusalem and stopped, Luke tells us, for just one person? Verse 5, I think, is very significant in Luke chapter 19. This is what Jesus says: I must stay in your house today. So there's Zacchaeus up the tree, Jesus underneath. But I think it's important to remember, first of all, he used his name. Zacchaeus, I must stay in your house today. There's no other instance in Scripture where Jesus volunteers his company. Doesn't that tell us that Jesus knew he would be welcome in the home of Zacchaeus? And I needed to remind myself, and maybe you do too, that Christ never goes where he's not wanted, and he never stays away where he is wanted. Christ never goes where he's not wanted, and he never stays away where he is wanted. Again, recorded in Scripture, Jesus often referred to this great must. And here it is again when he speaks to Zacchaeus up the tree. What was the must? Well, we know. The must was to accomplish the mission, the reason why he came. Why must he go to the home of Zacchaeus? Why? Well, we know. Because Zacchaeus and you and me and everyone else in his world, our world, is worth saving. In verse 10 from Luke 19, the story concludes, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. It's a very familiar story, and I know that nothing I've said this morning you won't have heard before. But I wanted us on this Sunday, second Sunday in Lent, just to remember, yes, the joy, the transformation that came to Zacchaeus, but the joy that came to Jesus, the joy that enabled him to move forward again to the cross happened on the road to Jerusalem. The word lost is an interesting word. If you're anything like me, you lose things quite regularly. The older I get, the more I lose them. I have a feeling I'm not alone, only because I seem to mention that quite often to my husband, and he mentions it back to me. What have I done with? Well, the word lost in the New Testament doesn't mean damned or doomed. It simply means what I'm talking about. Something is in its wrong place. A thing is lost when it's got out of its rightful place, and somehow it's not where it ought to be. And when we find it, eventually, we return it to where it should be. And we hope next time we'll remember. And you know, it's like that with us, isn't it? We are found. We were found. We are found when we take our place in the family of God. Jesus said to Zacchaeus, when they eventually were in his home, today salvation has come to this house. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. For Zacchaeus, for everyone, salvation isn't a future possibility, it's a present reality. It's something that Zacchaeus discovered could be lived now. I wonder if sometimes we allow the future to sort of override the present. God's promises, oh yes, we believe them, something to be fulfilled in the future, in some distant time that we can't very clearly see. And we allow the problems of today to claim our attention. But from the story of Zacchaeus, we learn that it happened at that moment when Zacchaeus opened his home and, even more importantly, opened his heart to Christ. We know what he did. He immediately said he would recompense not just the money he'd taken falsely as it was, but 4 times as much. I wonder what Jesus asks us to give to him today. I know for myself, and you will know for yourself. And I guess we would agree on that. It will take a determined effort. I love the writings of Eddie Askew, and I turned to one of his little poems, meditations, prayers, call them what you will. When Eddie wrote about Zacchaeus, the righteous were appalled when they saw Jesus making friends with Zacchaeus, a rabbi, a tax collector. Shocking! Tax collectors weren't accepted in polite Jewish society. And this is what he wrote, or continued to write. The present moment is the only one of which I'm sure. And if I am to live for you, it's now that counts, not promises of future faithfulness, whether mine or yours. If Zacchaeus standing there had said, just give me time, I'll change my life tomorrow, I have a feeling Jesus might have turned away, a hint of sorrow in his eyes, a chances missed, another weak excuse like those I make at every turn. Today, you say, today, you ask, and stand and wait for my response. But lift your eyes and look at me. Beckon me down from the branches of my hesitation. Invite yourself into my life and help me start today to live in your salvation. I pray that for us each, on our journey, wherever we are at this moment, we will know again the joy that Zacchaeus knew when, looking down out of the tree, Jesus said, I must come to your home today. We can be sure, can't we? He says that for each of us. Amen.